I'm shooting molten aluminum out of my fingertips, for crying out. Unless it's like a barbecue or something, spend more than an hour or so in someone's garage, and you've likely outstayed your welcome. But would you just have a look at who's still here? I said, who's still here? Thank you. Would everyone please say hello to the revolution? Hello, Revolution. HTP's first foray into multi-process welders. I think it is anyway. Maybe I made that up. What do I look like, some kind of art historian over here? That last statement bugged me a little and I had to stop and do some research. Turns out, this is not their first multi-process welder. You see, it depends exactly what you mean by multi-process. If you mean more than one process, then you're right. You have me on a technicality, it's not their first. I sort of teased this machine a couple of videos ago. I've had a lot more time with it since then and I thought we might chat about it. What do you say? While you consider an answer to that question, let's quick recap exactly what an MPW is, or multi-process welder for short. It's not just a MIG welder or a stick welder. It's not just a TIG welder. It's some combination of those. I mean, heck, you can even get welders with built-in plasma cutters these days. What will they think of now? That sounds pretty cool in theory, right? One box to rule them all. However, I've never really been a fan of multi-process machines. Be they welders, 3-in-1 mills, drills, and lathes, sheet metal shears, benders, rollers, painters, whatever. They often try to do too much and usually don't do one thing very well. I learned that lesson the expensive way. So when HTP reached out and told me about this thing, I was like, super cool, have fun with that, we appreciate your call. Short story shorter, after some back and forth, I agreed to take it for a test drive, and they sent this out to me. And I've been impressed enough with it that I figured it warranted talking about. And why I'm pretty sure, are you sitting down for this? Pretty sure it'll be replacing what I thought was my forever welder. The Invertig 221. I've really gotten to love this machine. I've had children out of wedlock with this machine. I thought this was going to be my forever welder. I don't want to alarm anyone, but turns out I'm not getting any younger. And forever welder might not be as far off as it sounds. Well, that got a little dark. But here's a fun fact for you to turn things around. It's my understanding that the Revolution is Pete Zilla's baby. Pete Zilla, not Godzilla. Both of which have welding channels here on YouTube. Zilla, can I call you that? Mr. Zilla? I was first introduced to him back in the Chucky 2000 era. Anyway, I think Mr. Zilla eventually made his way in with HTP. And I think he worked with them at sort of picking out the feature set for this multi-process machine. I've come to trust Pete and have had great experience with the Invertig, so here it is. Anyway, we were talking about my beef with multi-process welders. And it's usually come down to one thing, maybe two. First, historically anyway, multi-process has almost always meant DC TIG. No AC on the TIG side. They've just been DC machines that also push wire, which means no welding aluminum, no magnesium, no reactive metals, I think they call it. But is that a bad thing? No, not at all. Not necessarily. If all you weld is stainless steel, no sense in shelling out money for a machine that can do air conditioning. I'm just a hobby guy in his hobby garage doing nothing important. Frankly, the kind of guy that prefers to do nothing at all. But call me a prepper, I like to be ready for anything. AC for aluminum has always been a must. Ergo factoid, I've never really considered multi-process machines. That evidently seems to be changing. This freaking thing does AC and DC TIG. pulsed TIG. It does MIG and pulsed MIG, stick and pulsed stick. And if you wanted to, it's all synergic, if you're into that sort of thing. It'll essentially set all of your weld parameters if you ask it to, or get you close anyway. The only thing this thing doesn't do is make coffee. Despite this being a multi-process machine, this Revolution does everything my Invertig does. Almost. It also does everything my ProPulse does. Almost. The Revolution is these two machines squashed into one. Almost. And that's what I'd like to talk about. Almost. Instead of going through this machine feature by feature, I'm going to skip a lot of the stuff you've probably already seen on this channel. Instead, I'd like to talk about the differences. Consequently, this won't be a deep dive into the TIG side, since we've already talked about it here. TIG welding steel, aluminum, pulsed welding, TIG brazing, all of that stuff. The Revolution does all of that with some differences, but no point in showing all of it to you again. What I would like to do is finally try aluminum MIG welding. Yes, the ProPulse could do that just fine. I've just literally never tried it. I may have stacked the odds against myself. I got some eBay wire here. I'm willing to bet this process, aluminum MIG, is pretty dependent on the quality of wire you're running through, and I don't know. I guess we'll see. This is 40 thou ABS wire. Connections on the front are what you'd expect until you have a closer look. Can you spot the difference? There is no positive and negative terminals. This machine does auto switching. I don't know if that's the technical name, that's just what I'm calling it for now. And it's about time if you ask me. It's got a connector on the end there for a ground clamp and a connector over here for the shocky end. TIG torch, stick, stinger, I don't know what that third icon is. A ball peen hammer. A spool gun maybe. On the Invertig, you have a positive and a negative terminal. TIG, you'd hook up on the negative side and ground goes to positive. If you plan to stick weld, you'd have to invert those, usually. There's exceptions. Same story on the ProPulse MIG welder. You've got a positive and a negative terminal. But here they're using like a pigtail jumper. Since you can't plug that special MIG gun connection just anywhere, you switch where the pigtail is going. On the Revolution, that's all done for us. Depending on the mode you select on the panel, the connections switch inside. No more need for you to play old-timey telephone operator. Samesies on the back. The machine has two gas connections, one for TIG and one for MIG. Put it in the MIG mode and it'll get gas out of here. Put it in the TIG mode and it'll get gas out of here. One thing I've got to get off my chest before we get into this thing. HTP, I don't know if you're watching, but nowhere in this manual does it say how to start a Revolution or some other equivalent dad joke. I mean, come on, that should have been top of page 1. You know what caught my eye when the chatter first started about this thing? It's a 250 amp welder. The Invertig is 220 amps. This is 250. If my calculator is to be trusted, that's 30 more amps. And here's the important part. 250 welding amps on the same line I've been running the Invertig. If that's not free energy, I don't know what is. Top end is 250, but they've also played some interesting games with the bottom end. This thing, like the Invertig, still has a nice low 5 amp start, meaning that's the lowest you can start. 5 amps is the lowest you can weld at. Now that is pretty darn low. There's not very much, if anything, you'll weld at 5 amps. But on thin stuff, it's nice to have. Not as much of a shock as like a 15 or a 20 amp start when you're trying to weld thin stuff. Now on top of that, we have access to a hot start menu on the TIG side. I really only learned this with this machine, but I guess all TIG welders have a hidden hot start. Something higher than your low end start amps. It's a little bit of extra juice at the start to get the arc to actually jump, to initiate the arc. From what I've come to understand, that initial hot start, even though it's less than half a second, could be a significant amount of current. Again, just to get that spark going. Then it'll drop to your start amps. In fact, I had the chance to try it recently on a little carburetor fix. Sorry I didn't get a video, but I had a little bit of an audience. Maybe you can make that out. That's a broken float bowl post. I have no idea what this guy was doing to break the post off in the freaking carburetor, but must not have been pretty. This is a scary weld. For me, it's small, it's thin. Experience has taught me that as soon as you light a TIG arc on something like this, well, that whole carb could melt away into a shiny puddle on your floor. People tend not to like it when you do that to their parts. And that's what it looked like when all was said and done. All's well that ends well. The penetration on that weld is certainly not 100%, but I got enough material in there to feel good about the fix. So here, since I now had the option, I decided to drop that hot start, like really low. That low though, I did have trouble getting the arc to start. But in the end, I ended up polishing my electrode on a CBN wheel. That seemed to do the trick. I guess in hindsight, the smart thing would have been to drop down an electrode size or two. But like I said, there was an audience. Performance anxiety. Since you mentioned arc starts, let's chat about that. The arc, much to my surprise, is a little different here. I don't know if HTP changed the secret recipe or what, but I noticed a difference in temperament. I don't know how to describe it. Still super smooth, just like the Invertig, if that means anything to you, but now it's got a little more spunk. Maybe that's more the arc starts and not so much during the welding, but lighting the arc sounds like you're cracking a whip. And once it's lit, it's very tenacious. My first tip off though that it might be related to the high frequency start is that it now triggers my welding helmet. I mean, without striking an arc, it'll darken my welding helmet. I've got a 3M speed glass. Speaking of high frequency start, man, I'm all over the place, sorry. There's just a lot that's changed at the same time. With the revolution, HTP has finally introduced what I think is real lift arc. And frankly, I'm over the moon about it. This might get a little confusing because the Invertig, the 221, already has a function called lift arc, but there's a difference. To explain that difference, let's recap what high frequency and lift arc are, why they're even there, and when you'd want to use them, or not use them for that matter. Somehow you, or the machine, have to start that arc so that you can weld with it. Originally, you'd have to scratch start your arc. With scratch start, you're creating an electrical short. You have full weld power behind that sleeping electrode, and you're just making that momentary contact to initiate welding. High frequency start, on the other hand, works just like an igniter on your barbecue. You push the button and some electrical something or other creates a spark. And the lightning strikes that create make a pathway for the current, starting the arc and again letting you weld. Here in the comfort of my garage, I use high frequency start almost exclusively. But there are instances where it can be dangerous. High frequency start creates a lot of electrical interference that broadcasts further than you might expect. For like 200 milliseconds, you're a little pirate radio station. That high frequency can cause problems for sensitive equipment that might be around, which consequently is the reason they won't let you TIG weld your mower deck in a hospital. You could potentially shut down someone's pacemaker. All that's to say, if you're patching a hole in the tailpipe of your buddy's fancy new car, turn off the high frequency start. If my voice sounds different, it may be because I just got a haircut. But I think before the haircut, we were talking about lift arc. Lift is like scratch, but you're not shorting the electrode. When you put it in lift mode, the welder can detect when that electrode touches the work. Think of it like a continuity tester on your multimeter. As soon as you lift that electrode, the welder can tell, and it kicks in the welding current. It's doing that like the instant you break the connection. With lift arc, you run none of the risks of broadcasting your pirate high frequency. You don't get any of the chicken scratches, arc strikes, or skid marks that come from scratch start. We have a new lift arc, Lift Pipe Smart. Hopefully you can read that. Again, Lift Pipe Smart in this case is just old school lift arc. It's lift arc without a pedal, without a button. Why is that so exciting, I hear you ask? Well, for me anyway, it lets me work around my bench without having to drag around the foot pedal. To use the classic examples, if you're under a car or up on a ladder, well, the foot pedal isn't super convenient. The new old lift arc lets me roam around wild and free. Well, out to about 25 feet anyway, that's how long my torch lead is. It's starting to feel like this video is getting way too long, but there's a lot here, and maybe more than I could reasonably cover in one video. The new display, for example, or rather the ProPulse style display is a lot easier to read, and learn for that matter, compared to the LED display of the Invertig. Don't get me wrong, LED display is great. It's arguably faster than clicking your way through menus. But this machine has so much going on, if it had an LED for each function, it'd look like a Christmas tree. A Christmas tree with a lot of lights. That said, there are some things this hybrid machine lost along the way. First, there's no TIG spot mode. That's kind of a bummer. I didn't use it a ton on the 221, but when the need arose, I'll admit it was nice to have. With the Revolution, I'm back to manually blasting with the foot pedal. Second, the Revolution has no asymmetric waveforms. The 221 will let you set electrode positive and electrode negative independently, and you can't do that here anymore. In theory, that does make me sad, but in practice, I've never actually used asymmetry. Triangle wave, half the power of a regular wave. What's it like? We'll find out. Triangle wave. Can't believe I just blew a hole in my Air France can. 2,000? If you're wondering why airfare has gotten so expensive, it's certainly not because of their cans. So we lost asymmetry, but HTTP has given us a triangular wave function. That I'm pretty excited about. I'm still learning how to use it, but short story, triangle waveform nets you the same peak welding amperage with half of the heat input. And unless you're still on your honeymoon, less heat input is almost always a good thing. If you look at the square wave typical of modern TIG welders under a microscope or something, and compared it to a triangle wave of the same frequency, you may notice there's less area under that triangle shape. Less area means less power, less heat. For now though, what I really want to try is this aluminum MIG welding. I'll be honest, I'm a little nervous trying this quote-unquote live for the first time on camera. So we'll work through this together and we'll see what happens. I don't think this is a drive roll for aluminum. Let me check my ProPulse. All right, here we go. This has never been opened. 035, 045 drive roll aluminum. Let's see if it fits. Okay. You know what? I should probably mount that MIG torch. So go get a broken O-ring on here. I don't have another one. Let's hope this works. Come on, this torch isn't that long. And there it is. I got the torch set up. I tried to set the feed roller tension like you would for welding steel, but I couldn't really back the tension off enough. Well, I couldn't set it up the same exact way, so maybe that's not how it works. All right, let's see if we can't figure this out. There are 4 MIG modes. That's manual MIG. You can set your voltage and your wire speed however you see fit. It's got a MIG 2T and a MIG 4T, and there's a MIG 4TS. 4TS looks like it's a sequencer because it starts to give you the option. It starts to give you like sequencer options. Every time you push the trigger, you can sort of sneak your way into some amperage control using a sequencer. I'm just gonna go into 2T, synergic, because I don't know what I'm doing. Aluminum, that's right. 4043, I think that's right. We'll see that as soon as we light up. 035, and now I should just have to pick the material thickness. It'll probably be 1/8. 1/8 gives us 2 synergic settings. And then you can adjust the voltage, but it's a little over my head. Let's just try it out right out of the box. I assume all the same rules apply. This should be cleanish. Here goes nothing. The only thing I really know from hearing it on the street, I need to keep a longer tip distance, and this prefers to be pushed instead of pulled. Wish me luck. That felt like it should be a little hotter. I just went to the second of the 2 programs. That was hotter, but it was weird. I had to stop a minute and sort out what I think is a soot problem. That looked like way too much soot to me coming off those welds. I'm expecting a little from aluminum MIG, but that seemed excessive. And the spatter I don't think is right. Though, frankly, it wasn't that much. I ended up digging around for an O-ring that would fit that connection we saw earlier. I mean, that's gotta be what was doing it, right? I didn't have the exact match, but it was close. I had to really push it in there, but I don't think we should have a leak anymore. That was not like riding a bike at all. But would you have a look at that? I'm shooting molten aluminum out of my fingertips, for crying out. The soot situation is a lot better. I guess they put those O-rings in there for a reason, huh? It's got this optical illusion of being very proud, but it's not that tall of a bead. No spatter to speak of. Penetration isn't great, a little bit towards the end there. I assume a few more amps would fix that. These were ice cold, by the way. And probably doesn't help that they're just laying right on my cold hard bench. But you know what's really impressive right now? I just welded 2 of these back to back. There's the second one, still a little toasty. I did a second one so I could film that arc shot that you saw. Anyway, 2 back to back plus 2 from before, and there is no smoke in here. I can still breathe just fine. Hey, granted, this wasn't a ton of welding, but if this would have MIG'd like steel, I'd have to start opening up the garage doors. Unless this isn't one of those hidden, undetectable dangers they told us about in those after-school specials, is it? I don't know if this is legit or not. These welds should have been a little bit hotter, but I'm curious. Nice. And that is the double pulse. Pulse on pulse. Completely irrational thing for me to try. I just couldn't help myself. But that doesn't seem all too bad for my second double pulse weld, if I may say so myself. Here's the first one. That seemed a little hot to me out of the gate. You can still sort of see the ripples in there though. That's probably a better weld than this one, but I like the way this one looks more than this one. Anyway, learning curve. Just real quick, I want to try backstepping with single pulse. I should probably say something clever in my defense, but that looks better than most of my TIG welds. I'm surprised and scared at the same time at how easy this is turning out to be. Anyway, I gotta go. I'm gonna go hang this thing on my fridge. My apologies for the interruption. I'm future Tony from after the end of this video, and I only want a second of your time. Maybe 10. I'm doing a welder giveaway. 2 welders, in fact. I find myself in the embarrassing situation of now having 3 welders. Full disclosure, HTP has gifted me the revolution. To share some of that love and restore balance to the universe, I want to give away my Invertig and my ProPulse. And while I'm here, I want to take the opportunity to just say HTP has been really cool about everything. Frankly, I was reluctant, but they sent us out with no strings attached and they've been true to their word. Asked for absolutely nothing in exchange, explicitly. Credit where credit is due is what I'm trying to say. Sure, HTP is getting some publicity, of course, just from the fact that we're now talking about it. If you're wondering why I'm giving these away and not the new one, I mean, what do I look like, an idiot? Even after everything we talk about in this video, I gotta say the one thing I like the most about this revolution is the space that it saves me. I'm in a small garage, and this machine will competently replace 2 big welding carts. Floor space out here is worth its weight in gold, though I'm not quite sure how much floor space weighs. These are my machines I'm giving away, not HTP's. They're not brand new, but in welding terms, they've hardly broken a sweat here in my hobby garage. Nonetheless, I'm going to send them back to HTP for a full checkup before you get them. I'd love for these machines to go to someone who could really have fun with them. Learn with, build with, grow a business with, whatever. I'll follow up with more info when these machines have been checked and are ready to go. If you have no interest or intention of actually using them, I respectfully ask you not throw your name in the hat. But, you know, you do you. Though it'd be a shame for them to end up as a quirky nightstand just for kicks, or on eBay for that matter. My dog gets really upset when anybody mentions eBay. Sit tight, I'll keep you posted. Now back to the... Would you just have a look at that? I did get a little hole right there where I started. I don't even know if that's in focus, but I'm too excited to be worrying about that now. This was actually going pretty well. No holes, I don't think. I don't know if that's a hole. Yeah, I just sort of stacked some spot welds. I didn't have the courage to keep that pedal to the metal. But down here, the cans tend to be a little thicker, so I pushed my luck. There's that hole. This is with the hot start turned all the way down to 5 and the weld amps turned all the way down to 5. The foot pedal was less than halfway. I was just bumping it. I guess that was 5 amps. Nice. And it smells like Coca-Cola in here now. I'm starting to see now what all the commotion's been about with MIG welding aluminum. I have to admit it's pretty fun, and for my first try I think some of these are quite respectable. I know that's pretty relative. I've got a lot of practice ahead of me yet, but it's a bit scary just how easy it is. The setup time though is kind of what I expected, dialing in the MIG welding process. Sure, maybe that's just my learning curve, but if I had an aluminum part come in the door, like one off, one of a kind, I'd probably still TIG weld it. Not to say TIG doesn't need some dialing in, but if it's not going like you expect, you'll see that in like the first few dabs. MIG right now feels like a lightning strike and crossing my fingers. In the blink of an eye, you could have a foot of bad weld. But for production, maybe a big project where you have time and space to dial it in, certainly MIG aluminum wins hands down. eBay. On the TIG side, what can I say? It's definitely doing the job. And that extended range, top and bottom, is pretty sweet, I've got to admit. All in all, I'd probably put it this way. If you're TIG welding and that's it, go for a dedicated TIG welder. If all you're doing is MIG, go for a dedicated MIG machine. If, though, you're like me and you never know what you'll need and you're tight on space, these new generation multi-process machines are making a case that's hard to argue with. And the revolution seems to be walking the walk. It looks like, in a job shop type situation where you need that AC TIG, multi-process is now a contender. Huh, that's not something I ever thought I'd say out loud. But you know what is? I always appreciate your company, and thanks for watching.